What made you lose respect for someone? Someone I once considered a very close friend showed me they will use anything to their advantage, and place their personal gain above all else at the expense of others. While I don't really fault them for making themselves their top priority in life, it's the cutthroat nature that made me step back and realize that I can't place trust in this person I treated like a sibling. I was at a bonfire with a drunk girl and she suddenly had the bright idea to jump over the fire. I promptly said no, that's an awful idea, which was then when one of my friends slapped me in the face hard and punched me in the chest even harder. Mind you, she had hella rings on, and said don't tell her what to do, grabbed the drunk girl's hand and proceeded to jump the fire. Brother-in-law whose step-grandfather had just died, ex-stepdad's ex-stepdad, it was complicated, went back to deal with the funeral stuff, turned out he ended up getting a large chunk of change from the inheritance, comes back and, more or less out of the blue, a couple days before their wedding anniversary, tells her that he's moving out, wants a divorce. Their kids can come visit whenever, they're adults at this point but still living at home, but they all live like 20 hours away from where he's moving back to, and demands that they do the divorce without lawyers, which my sister agreed to, and they did. When they incorporate any way, shape, or form into sentences, instant dislike. Having face tattoos. I don't hate them, I just can't take them seriously. When I found out my aunt ditched my family for her so-called friends who only caused extreme trouble. I worked on a long project with my co-worker. We'll call him Terry. When we started working together, we were both members of the same cult. He was a sign seeker and borderline conspiracy theorist, and about half of his conversations devolved into sideways discussions about politics, gender, and race. The cult cultivated that kind of stuff. At first, we got along swimmingly, but I hard-noped out of the cult a while after we started the project. As my knowledge of the real world increased, it became harder to talk with him. I practiced tolerance because I knew anything but the mildest retorts would make him dig in his heels, as I had so many times before. So, okay, I just have to pussyfoot around him for the sake of the project and to keep peace at the office, which had other cult members as well. But we spent long hours together, and he shared a lot about his own life. He told me about his daughter, who had spent time in various psychiatric hospitals. One day, Terry told me she got the courage to come out to him as bi. He lost it. Thinking I was still in the cult, he complained to me, I just don't know where her relationship with the cult is anymore. She had attempted suicide because of the pain of coming out, and all he could think about was her indoctrination with the cult. Luckily, he harassed his way out of the company soon after. I have zero tolerance for that kind of BS anymore. Moved across the state in high school and kept in contact with a good friend, found out half a year later that apparently my old partner at the time had spread lies about my friend being a school shooter and planning to shoot up the school, on top of telling lies about him being a generally shit person. What really pissed me off more is they admitted to lying, and previously when I had known them, they hated people who lied, yet lied about something pretty serious because they disliked my friend. My sister and her husband decided to circumcise their first and subsequent sons. Now, my means of arguing against it wasn't very approachable, as I had recently come to grips with the full realization of what had been done to me in my infancy, but that they understood it wasn't necessary. Common justifications are as preventative measures, and still set on it, they disgusted me. Add in that they rejected my also recent relationship with another man, just over 4 years, now, in tandem with our incongruent political and religious views, and I decided it's easier to just cut ties with them unless I hear word from our parents that they've turned any corners. Voting for Biden, the destroyer of America. What made me lose respect for someone was when my former best friend broke the one promise I asked of them to cut off a genuinely toxic person. They cheated on their girlfriend at the time, who was also a great friend of mine, with said toxic person. They basically threw away the majority of all the friends they made for someone who lived in NorCal who could care less about them. It still bothers me to this day. Hair. Somebody shit in my pillowcase. It was an animal. 1. When my dad adopted me, my bio dad threw a party and burned everything he had with my name on it. I've never talked to the man. I've only seen him in person once, at his funeral, after he killed himself. 2. Mom got drunk and told me how she never wanted me but probably wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for me. Okay, not too bad, right? Well, she went on to say that because her parents were religious they wouldn't let her get an abortion. So she went to Six Flags while pregnant with me and rode every single roller coaster trying to have a miscarriage. I was maybe 12 at most. I halfway lost respect for someone who I was friends with for 9 years. I told them I liked them more than a friend one time, and they said they didn't feel the same. After that, I never pursued them, but respectfully treated them only as a friend, and encouraged them, and kept certain boundaries, and we both were in communication until they misunderstood a text that I wanted to meet with them, and an encouraging email. Then I only talked to them in person for several years until I was unable to, then I called them to check on them, and they assumed that I believed that they liked me, which I had told them already I knew they didn't. I also called them prior to that assumption I didn't like them that way. Then they ended the friendship completely without an explanation. I still care about this person since we used to be friends, but half of the time, I feel like I don't have the same amount of respect for them since they judged me and didn't even seem to believe me when I didn't even pursue them for several years. Indeed, I had just called them to check on them as a friend. When they didn't return the call, I sent them a social media message to ask about it, and they put me on ignore. I had asked another person about it, and they had said they didn't want to be friends. When my boss refuses to confront an entitled customer's ridiculous demands and gives in to them immediately, even if it means we are underselling something. It's not even the money, it is the rewarding bad behavior and cowardice that makes me disappointed in them. When they're really all about themselves and the money, not helping others in need as they claimed. Not knowing the tragedy of death plagues the wise. He hit his wife. I broke his windshield, my brother broke his face. When my best friend had a problem with me dating someone outside our race. We're white. He even started with the "I'm not racist but," proceeds to insert racist comment. This was over 20 years ago and I eventually married that girl. Haven't spoken to the dude since. Kept complaining about issues they have in life but doing nothing about the problem. One example, they complained about being broke, then asked to borrow cash, about $500, for bills. Said no, and the next day we saw this person out drinking in a bar. Ignore COVID protocol, get COVID but don't get tested cause then you could get a positive test result and then you'd have to go into quarantine and then you can't make money. Infect me with COVID because of all this. When I was venting about some serious issues I was having in my life with a friend, they ended up turning it into a conversation about their problems. It just felt like they didn't actually care. Let's just say I don't tell them about my personal issues anymore. Visited a friend from high school I hadn't seen in a long time to congratulate her on her pregnancy and catch up. While there she told me that she suspected the baby wasn't her husband's but knew she'd be able to tell in the delivery room, so she wasn't going to say anything to him until she saw. There was a person I was friends with from elementary, middle school that I constantly gained and lost respect for. I lost respect for her multiple times for many reasons. / she was a giant hypocrite. X, she would constantly take food from my pantry / fridge when I wasn't looking and refuse to put it back, and once when she did ask for food and I said no, she complained I was being selfish, so I ended up saying yes. However, she refused to give me her food when I asked, saying it's my food, I don't need to give any to you. Or this food is my breakfast, and when I was looking in the pantry at another friend's house, she said you're so rude. Stop trying to take food from other people's houses. Well girl, you take food from my house all the time, you take my breakfast without asking, so why can't I take yours? And you say it's selfish for people to say no when you ask for their food, so why do you say no when people ask for yours? Backslash she would ask me to go to the park or her house with her, only for people at the park or her siblings and siblings' friends to bully me, and she would bully me with them. Backslash there was a small incident that happened to us when we were in 4th grade that made her mom not let her be around me anymore. She was allowed to be around me again after only 1 to 2 weeks though, but for the rest of the school year she still acted like she wasn't allowed to be around me while we were at school. Backslash lied constantly. Backslash egged my house once.